I think the magic of the deadline is that it forces you to focus. Look, I only have this much time. If I have this goal, here's what I need to do to achieve it. And then everything which is not related to that, it just drops away completely. It's so beneficial to have some kind of meaningful deadline. It could be about customers. We need to ship this by a certain date. We need to actually get it done by then. That's why I was kind of able to achieve the thing. Hi, I'm John Whaley. I'm the founder of Inception Studio and also founder of 3 cybersecurity companies, Mocha 5, UnifyID, and RedCoat AI. I graduated from MIT with my master's and bachelor's in computer science, and also from Stanford with my PhD in computer science. I'm also on the Stanford faculty in the computer science department. Inception Studio is a very unique model. Unlike most accelerators, we're actually a nonprofit accelerator, which means we don't take any equity in the companies. That's because we're focused on quality. We want to get the very best quality founders anywhere. We focus on the very earliest stages. We run these 72-hour retreat events where you go from just having a rough idea about what you might want to do and then meet up with co-founders and then form a team, and then you actually go and pitch the company at the end. And so it's super intense, which is intentional. You're looking for co-founders. You want to know how people operate under pressure. We've had quite a few success stories that come through in Inception so far. Andy Chow, he was previously founder of a company called Coverity. He came to one of our Inception events, the first one in fact. At the end of that event, he had a team, he had a refined idea, he had a demo, he had a pitch deck, and he had a set of investors who were all interested in what he was doing. They ended up raising a $10 million round, seed round, led by Andreessen Horowitz. It's a very interesting area. This was kind of like the genesis of the idea, and this idea happened at the Inception event. I got started with computers very young, at 5 years old. My family had bought a computer. We didn't really have many games for the computer. And so my option there was there used to be these magazines. You would have the listings, the code listings for games. You could type in and then you could run the games. So that's how I got started back when I was 5. I was in kindergarten. And I would just sit there and type in all the code. And then of course, as you're typing this, you're kind of learning these things. And then because I was not satisfied with just the games as they were, I wanted to be able to make modifications to them and change things about them. And so I would have to basically learn how to manipulate the code to get it to do what I wanted. That's how I got started. I've been doing computer science ever since I was in high school. I was not a good student. I had all of my teachers and my parents, everybody else, they said, oh, you're gonna go to MIT and you're gonna struggle and you're gonna get C's and you're gonna fail classes, stuff like that. My first sense that I was actually good at this stuff is there was a qualification round for the USA Computer Olympiad. I had taken the AP Computer Science as a sophomore and I did well in the class and everything. And then my teacher there, she learned about the USA Computer Olympiad. She's like, why don't you try this? And then so other problems I had in the computer science class were pretty easy. So the problems I had on the computer Olympiad, these were hard. And there's one problem in particular that was really challenging. And I was just I know there's a solution there. I just gotta figure this out. And then later on, I actually found out that I was the only person in the US that had solved that one. I think there were 6 problems, and there was one of the problems that nobody else had solved except for me. So that was my first indication that would be maybe I am kind of good at these things. And then I kind of did the competitive thing. Again, it was you have the format there is you have 3 hours and you have to basically program the solution within a short period of time. In preparation for that, I went to the local bookstore, and this was actually the algorithms book that was used in the MIT Classic 6046. And so that was the main reason that I went to MIT, because of that book. There's so many amazing algorithms and stuff in there. I love just reading about them and trying them out. That was kind of what opened my eyes to that whole side of computer science. I was very fortunate to get accepted to MIT because my grades were not great, but I think because I had that computer Olympiad experience, I think based on that, then I got accepted to MIT. I don't think I had any kind of natural skill and can learn faster than kind of other people. I think I just was much more dedicated to it because I had that deadline. I think the magic of the deadline is that it forces you to focus. It's I'm never able to finish things unless there's a deadline. But as soon as I get that pressure, then it just clarifies everything. It's well, look, I only have this much time. If I have this goal, here's what I need to do to achieve it. And then everything which is not related to that, it just drops away completely. So I think for me personally, it's very clarifying just in terms of just allowing me to really focus. That's why I was kind of able to achieve the things. myself and like some of the other members of my research group in the computer science department at Stanford, we met with Vinod Khosla, who is, founder of Sun. And we talked with him, and then I think it was the next day we received like a term sheet from him. Effectively what he said was like, here's $3 million, go build something cool. I was actually planning to be a professor. I had interviewed at a bunch of for tenure track like faculty jobs that I didn't get kind of tenure track offers from either one. So I was at that kind of life stage where it's like I was trying to figure out what to do next. And then there's this opportunity. I was like, oh, we can found this company. Vinod Khosla is going to back it. And like it's like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. So that was my first company, Mocha 5. Basically at Mocha 5, what we're trying to build was, we call it the next generation computing utility. And like we envisioned a world where you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining software and maintaining your operating system and patching and updates and antivirus and things like that. This is like back in the early 2000s. It's like, oh, I wanted a piece of software. It used to be like you would go to the store and you would like buy a CD and you would install the software on your computer. And we envisioned the world where you would be able to call up your service provider and like who's providing your computing service, say, hey, I want Photoshop. And they would like turn on a switch and then suddenly you would have Office and it would be a new icon in your desktop. And like we naively believe that internet companies and these kind of like the cable company, your DSL, like they're gonna wanna do this. They're gonna get lock-in there, they're gonna have all your files, it's providing a great service and like everyone's gonna wanna do this. It was like, no, okay, that's not, ignore the kind of reality of the world. The place where we actually started to get traction was when we realized that there's an opportunity on the business side where there's all these companies that wanted to provide computing environments, but people wanted to use their own computers. And the big breakthrough for us was the release of the MacBook Air. It was like the sexy new computer and like everybody wanted one. But these companies were like, oh, well, we're a Windows shop, we're a Microsoft shop. All the business phone was BlackBerry and they had all the features, all the enterprise features. And then an iPhone came along and then suddenly people wanted an iPhone and they wanted to bring these into the companies and use them in the company. It's like, well, it doesn't support MDM and all the other things that you need. Well, we don't care, like we want to use it. And so then there's an opportunity there. So we rode that opportunity, like the Mac and the enterprise, the bring your own device, like all of that. And so that was like when we started to do well, is where we kind of really began to focus on that problem. That was the opportunity that existed in the market. And then we started to get some early traction there. And our first really big customer was Goldman Sachs. We had to do some like crazy sweetheart deal to like get them. It was like not very much money for an unlimited license of all you can eat. They can use us in perpetuity. That's the type of deal that you have to do when you're an early stage startup, because as soon as you got Goldman Sachs, suddenly there's 10 other banks that are all interested, because like Goldman Sachs had a great reputation for cybersecurity and like all of that. It's like, oh, if you pass their bar, and we're now interested in you. But we've made a lot of missteps along the way. There was a time period where we ended up hiring kind of a CEO that was more consumer type, not really enterprise. We ended up burning a bunch of money through that and like just not really having anything to show for it. That kind of later on just ended up kind of compounding over time. And so it gets harder and harder as you get hit our Series C and Series D. It becomes harder to be successful there. We kind of went through multiple CEOs. And there's also, this is enterprise sales, enterprise deals. It's like elephant hunting. It's either you're gonna like kill the elephant, in which case we got some big, huge, like multi-million-dollar deal. And it's just like, hey, we blow out our numbers, or that PO doesn't come in time. And we also like hiring a bunch of really expensive inside salespeople. And it's a difficult game, especially early on when you are trying to do big enterprise deals as a small company. Some of the big lessons you learned from Mocha 5. Number one, just because somebody's willing to give you money doesn't mean it's a good idea or it's like worth your time. In this case, it was like Vinod came and he's like, oh, I want to give you money. I was like, oh, Vinod's famous. He's on the Midas list. This must be a great idea. Actually, that was not exactly true, because your time is worth more than their money. Another big lesson is like really put a lot of thought and consideration about who you have as investors. An investor may be nice to you, but when they put in a lot of money in their company, there's a lot of expectations there. Push comes to shove, they may not be kind of fully aligned with what the interests of the founders are. So again, being kind of careful about who you have involved in the company. Your first 20, like your founders and your first 20 employees, they determine like what is the DNA and the gene pool for your company. Those first 20 employees should be very intentional about who are we hiring, like what are the skills, like for the ones that like any of the ones that are going to stick around there, they're going to have a huge impact on the future of your company. So like, and what kind of company do you want to build? Is it like customer focused? Is it like all about product? Is it like technology? Those are all determined by like what is the DNA of the company, and that's determined by the people who are there early. Through my experience kind of through at Mocha 5, I just kind of fell into that role. I was doing things that was kind of not really like authentic, I guess. I wasn't particularly passionate about that problem. And I was doing a lot of things where it's like, oh, I felt like this is good for my career. In retrospect, it was like, it put everything in perspective for me about what was actually important in life. The company was kind of like less important at that point. And we ended up at a point where it's like, hey, I was like leave the company. And then things really just like crumbled from there. And they ended up like fire selling the company and everything. I started my second company called Unify ID. At Unify ID, we were solving this problem of identity and authentication. How do you identify yourself? In the age of computers, this is often a password. I come up with some secret and I tell you that secret, and then that's how you know that it's me. By the way, I'm not very good at coming up with the good secrets because I'm gonna reuse them all over the place. What if we say that we're not gonna require the user to do anything different? They just be themselves. Is it possible to like authenticate them in that context? And the answer is actually yes, because there's a lot that makes us unique. Things like the way that you walk and the way that you hold your phone and the way that you type. You combine them all together, the preponderance of the evidence, and it's like, this is almost certainly the right person at that point. So that was the world we envisioned. At Unify ID, we told a really big story, winning at a bunch of pitch competitions because of this. Like we were runner-up at TechCrunch Disrupt. We ended up winning at RSA. Based on that, we ended up raising a huge Series A, $20 million. And it's like, okay, now we have the money. Now let's go in and pursue that goal. And then it took us a long time to actually get to the point where it's like the technology reached to the point where it's like we were able to achieve the things that we wanted to achieve. In retrospect, like we would have been better off biting off a much smaller chunk and having that tighter deadline and like that specter of like, hey, we don't have 4 years of runway here. We have like 18 months because it forces a lot of discipline there. At Unify ID, we kind of ended up having like too broad of a vision. We didn't achieve our full potential there. There's all these like very interesting intermediate points where we could have spent 2 months and built something that would have gotten us revenue right away and solved customer problems right away. All that changed when I did Unify ID. Honestly, I just became much more open and authentic and like honest with people. Curious thing happened when that happened, whereas like people started to react in a much more positive way. And then it's like, oh, it turns out people like respond to authenticity and like when you're honest about things and they can sense that. And then like naturally more people want to follow you. It was like, this is the company we want to build. This is the way we want to do things. But it was like very honest and authentic to ourselves. And then a lot of things that I'd struggled with in the past became a lot easier, just in terms of like things like for leadership, fundraising even, or inspiring people and that sort of thing. We eventually got acquired back in 2021, so right before our Series B. I was kind of at a point in my life where it's like, what do I want to do next? I'm very much a startup person. I like the kind of early stage. I knew that I wanted to do something in like the large language model and generative AI space. I mean, AI in general and machine learning, to do that kind of gate analysis and the other type of stuff we're doing, we're using a lot of sophisticated machine learning algorithms and everything. So from that, I was familiar with transformers and like everything that was happening in the LLM space. As soon as GPT-3 came out, I knew that there's a huge, very interesting commercial opportunities from LLMs. I began to explore, look around, like try to come up with some ideas. Honestly, I was not making a lot of progress on that because it was me sitting alone in my bedroom, just thinking about problems. I had no deadlines, I had no pressure. My life was just too comfortable. Time was just passing by, and this was back in 2022. GPT-3 had come out. There's kind of murmurings of like other things, GPT-4 that's going to be coming out soon. I need to make more progress here. This is not good. I know what I needed. Number one, I needed to get away from everyone and like just remove myself from all my distractions. And so I needed to go away somewhere for some short period of time, just be able to like focus. Number two is I needed to be surrounded by other really smart people. Most importantly is I needed a deadline. I go to Hack MIT pretty much every year and Tree Hacks and Cal Hacks. I love the kind of hackathon vibe and scene. Just like in that kind of intensity that you have and like the fact it just forces you to focus. So like it's just sought to kind of recreate that type of feeling. And so went on Vrbo, like the vacation rental site, rented out this house in Lodi, which is like middle of nowhere. And I just started calling people up and say, like, we have this place in the countryside. Do you want to like go out there and just brainstorm and hack and just try to build a startup? And the topic area was large language models and generative AI. And so this was in November 2022. The event happened about 10 days before ChatGPT came out. So like the timing was perfect. And then out of that first event, actually 5 companies formed, which is really exciting. And the reason the event was so good is because the quality of the people there was really high. We want to run some more of these events, but so we thought about like, what kind of structure should this have? Like, and I've seen things like Y Combinator and Techstars and just a bunch of others, like these type of accelerator type of programs. They all had a common failure mode there, which was start off pretty good, and then they would try to scale, and they would scale at the expense of quality, and then they would not get as good founders, the quality dropped. And so like there was an adverse selection problem there, where it's like the best people would choose not to go, and it starts just like eventual downward spiral in terms of the reputation. And so it's like, well, why don't we just do this in a different way? Why don't we make it a nonprofit? We just want to run these events and put really good people together. When you're a nonprofit, a lot of these questions just kind of melt away about like, well, who owns the IP? Our goal is not to make a profit off of like these early stage founders. That's a very short-sighted view. The genesis of the next $1 billion to $10 billion or $100 billion company is like at that event. That is the actual value, because guess what? Maybe you get a chance to invest early or be an advisor or otherwise develop those relationships. That's where their actual value is. That's where you're going to get, the 1,000x returns and stuff. That was the genesis of Inception Studio. AI space is moving really quickly. The fundamentals don't really change. There's certain fundamentals about I'm building a company, I'm starting a company, about like who is the customer, what is the need that like you're actually solving for them, how do you reach that customer, what is your kind of differentiation, how are you 10 times better than what they otherwise have. If your solution is, hey, we take this amazing thing called GPT-4 and then we just kind of wrap it up in a nicer packaging for somebody else to use, that is not really a great sustainable business there. But if you're solving a real customer problem and you actually have differentiation there, and it could be differentiation in terms of access to data that you have that's really unique. It could be unique insights that you have, or it can even be things about like how you bring the thing to market. Like in terms of, I know like all of the people who are in this space and I've sold to them before and they all trust me, and so I can bring this to market better than anybody else possibly can. That can be your differentiation there, right? And like you can still be successful. And don't be fooled by the fact that there are businesses that exist that have raised a whole bunch of money. That's all they are fundamentally. Those are not what you want to be spending your time on. Yeah, sometimes people get lucky or they're happening businesses for now, but even major ones, like with Sora and like there's other kind of things that OpenAI is releasing. Wow, these are like some well-funded companies are now, it's like what happens to Pika Labs once that it's like Sora is released? It's like, ooh, that's a real question there. They're gonna have to keep innovating and end up doing something else because it just becomes really, really hard to compete there. And I think there's two parts of this game. And one is like, I would call it like the big boys game. You're building huge foundational models. Like the differentiation there is like, how many GPUs can I have and what kind of access to data I can have? And like that is a game that is very hard to compete with as a startup, unless you are very well funded. This is why you need to like raise these $1 billion rounds. It's like Anthropic and Mistral and those ones. They're trying to play that game with the Googles and the OpenAIs and the Microsofts and the others. That's a hard game to play because whether you win or not is like determined by your access to data and your access to compute and like how deep your pockets are, and you can always like outspend and stuff. And then, but there's a whole kind of ecosystem that's not that. There's great viable businesses there. Like we can have like a lot of differentiation where you're kind of being AI native, like you're actually fully embracing AI in your company. And there's a huge massive appetite for this. If you look at AI budgets, maybe 3-4 years ago, and like just globally, like IT spend, how much of it is spent on artificial intelligence? I think it doesn't even register on the pie chart. It's like less than 1%. Now it's huge. A huge proportion of the money that is being spent is on AI because there's so much promise. It's really unlocked with ChatGPT and like just like opened people's eyes about what the capabilities of these large language models are and like this generative AI and agents and everything else. It's not only like there's hype around it, but there's also like real capital behind it as well. And companies are spending like real money, like huge amounts of money to basically develop AI solutions that use AI. So if you can be in that space and you can position yourselves as one of these AI companies, there's a massive opportunities there. We're in the midst of this economic downturn. There's like layoffs happening and a bunch of other stuff. Economy is not great, like rising interest rates and all this. It's a challenging environment. If you look back to kind of 2008, 2009, 2010, like so many great companies were formed like during that time. Same thing is going to happen here. Some will be like the kind of OpenAIs and like building like these like huge foundational model things. Other ones are going to be around particular verticals, like using generative AI for finance or generative AI for legal or generative AI for marketing. It's going to end up touching all these different areas, and there's going to be some clear winners there.